All right, moving on. Now, the National Security Advisor of India, Ajit Doval, has met the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing today. The two special representatives have discussed the management of peace and tranquility along the line of actual control and the exploration of a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable solution to the boundary question. Now, prior to this meeting, China has stated that it is ready to work with India to implement important common understandings between the leaders of the two countries and work to bring bilateral relations back on track as soon as possible. Ties took a severe hit 4 years ago following the standoff between the Indian Army and the Chinese PLA at the line of actual control. But now it has been 2 months since a milestone disengagement was ensured. Now, China dismantled its military positions in Depsang and Demchok in October 2024, and the Indian patrol teams have resumed with their patrolling. Now, China has emphasized that both countries need to respect each other's core interests and major concerns, strengthen the mutual trust between the two countries through dialogue and communication, and properly settle differences with sincerity and good faith. The fresh satellite imagery, however, has now been released, which reveals that China has built 22 villages in Bhutanese territory at Doklam. Now, Doklam, which is located in Bhutan, was the site of a 73-day standoff between India and China in 2017, when New Delhi intervened to prevent the construction of a road and other such facilities that would have given China the access to the southernmost part of the plateau. Though the frontline forces of both sides pulled back from the region at the end of the standoff, satellite images from recent years have shown stepped up Chinese construction activity around Doklam. Now, these fresh images are cause of concern as Doklam is located close to the Siliguri corridor, that is the Chicken's Neck, which is a narrow stretch of land connecting India's mainland to the northeastern states. So, is China's statement an olive branch for improving ties between India and China, or do we still need to be wary of Xi Jinping's larger goal towards India and its territories along the line of actual control? I'm going to start my conversation with Ambassador Phunchuk Stobdan. He's a former diplomat. Thank you for joining me on the telecast, Ambassador. My first question about this very important meeting that has been held, which is the resumption of the representative level talks. Now that the National Security Advisor of our country, Ajit Doval, has visited Beijing, there is talk of peace and dialogue and figuring out the line of actual control, complications that India and China have been facing for decades together. Do you think this is a step in the right direction, and this rapprochement measure that has been taken by China is going to bear fruit? Joining me also on the telecast is Major General Sudhakar ji. The same question to you. Do you think this is a rapprochement measure that is going to benefit both nations?
Yeah, Megha, good afternoon. Thank you for getting me to your show. As regards to the question which you are asking, I personally feel we are in the second decade of 21st century. China needs India as much as India needs China. This is a practical statement of fact. Given the fact that we have an objective of $30 trillion economy by 2047 or earlier than that, and the economic dependence on the basic foundational products are so high that no matter how hard we try, we cannot actually de-risk, diversify or decouple entirely and yet achieve $30 trillion economy in the time frame that we have stipulated for ourselves. And the fact of the matter is that you look at everything with suspicion in today's international relationship, because the world is polarized, and China being what it is, we have had a very adverse and bad experience in '62, and China is also seized with the fact that there is only one country in the world which can stand up to its national interest and tooth and nail, that is India. And having got contiguous border with China, I personally feel, my take on the whole issue is that China has realized that India is not a pushover. And we have given them a lesson also, lots of lessons in past 4 years of extended standoff. And China, in a document which came out from a think tank, they have also realized that without taking India along, it will be difficult for China to rejuvenate the Middle Kingdom concept by 2049 or earlier than that. So, mutually speaking, both sides need each other. If there is a little bit of give and take, I don't see any reason to go in a progressive path. Last but not the least, Megha, if you allow me.
Quickly, sir.
The ultimate, the taste of pudding lies in eating. And what is that? The taste of pudding lies in eating, am I referring to? Is that sooner we settle the border issue, have a demarcated boundary, better it is for us to save these unavoidable expenditures to going on to the non-planned expenditure side. Both Pakistan as also China, majorly it is China. And in order to achieve that, a phase by phase, a stage by stage action is being taken, to my understanding. This is a fantastic move by the President.
Right. All right, sir. I'm going to bring in Adit Kothari also in the telecast with me. Adit, these have been calculated, cautious measures that have been taken by both sides. The step that has been initiated by China. I'm going to take you back just a couple of months ago when the Kazan SCO summit that took place in Russia. We saw for the first time there was some sort of a thaw that was witnessed between India and China. There was this informal greeting that was also exchanged between the leaders of the states, leaders of the countries, and right before that, if you go back in time, we saw that there was a message that was sent out by China with a conclusion drawn, an agreement held about demilitarization and de-escalation along the line of actual control. So right after that agreement is signed between both the countries, there is the SCO Kazan summit. It's also interesting to know that next year the SCO summit it is going to be hosted by Beijing, and there is once again an opportunity for Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping to hold these potential bilateral meetings or informal meetings, whichever way they want to discuss the matters ahead. And the larger sphere of geopolitical crises that whether we see in the Middle East or we see in terms of the change of guard that happens under President-elect US President-elect Donald Trump, or taking a look at the Ukraine-Russia war. Do you think these global events also have an impact on how China and India take forward their relationship here on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the global events do dominate a lot of the functioning of how China basically decides on their geopolitical strategies. For example, next year we also have the Quad Summit, and most likely it's going to be the President-elect Trump's first visit as well, the first international visit to India, which India is going to be hosting. So I'm sure that China is watching all of these developments very closely. But the one thing out of all of this is, since October 2024, there has been enormous amount of high-level meetings that have happened, whether it be from the senior level, from a Z Modi to a Jaishankar, now even to a Doval and Wang. So that demonstrates that there is the pace of these meetings are representative of some amount of keenness on both sides, that they need to de-escalate and they want to resolve more matters. Whereas the problem seems to be on India's side. The contentious border issues remain to be circling around as the main core issues, whereas the Chinese believe that one contentious issue should not hold the entire bilateral relationship as hostage. So that is where the disagreements continue to be. India is basically keeping a very hard stance from that perspective. But the one thing that I think we all need to take cognizance of, there are close to almost about 120,000 PLA soldiers even today that are manning the Himalayan border eye to eye. Until that disengagement starts and until that disengagement begins and we go back to pre-2020 scenarios, I don't think India is going to trust China, because I think the trust deficit is quite large. So that's we'll have to wait to see what sort of statements come out from this particular meeting, the
Okay.
diplomatic meeting, which is meant to be held today.
Okay.
Megha.
I have with me Ambassador Phunchok Stobdan, and thank you very much for joining us. And let's try to
Yeah,
also
sorry.
understand from you, sir, about the situation, the current situation along the line of actual control. There is a promise that has been made in terms of de-escalation that is potentially going to start after the demilitarization and disengagement. Along those specific points of which, friction points, Demchok and Depsang, do you think talks between India and China are going to help strategize our policy towards Beijing? And talks and dialogues are a way ahead in carrying forward this conversation about what India is putting its foot down when it comes to securing its sovereignty and integrity along the line of actual control, whether it is in Ladakh or for that matter in Arunachal Pradesh.
Well, the current disengagement has just been completed on the 28th of last month. But you are talking about de-induction and de-escalation, which is a long way ahead. I don't think even the talks have begun on that. I presume NSA would be talking about this in Beijing, but it's not just a border issue. It's a strategic issue. There are a lot of misunderstanding or doubts about each other. So I don't see de-escalation right now until the Chinese feel fully secure, because there are a lot of American projects going on in the Himalayas against China, and they want to ensure that those things are not there. Till then, I think they will keep the military conventional threat towards India alive. And my understanding as this long-standing 4.5 years standoff in Depsang has provided China the biggest opportunity to have a drill, to military exercises which is unprecedented, which may not be just an isolated phenomena. It is linked with Taiwan, it's linked with South China Sea and many other things. So don't think it is just about trade, it's about this or that, trusting China, not trusting China, or who blinked first. These are not the issue. The issue is the Chinese play a much bigger role. Sorry.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Vicky Nanjappa, it's not about trusting or distrusting China, because when we see negotiations happening, you see the US diplomats, foreign ministers traveling all the way to Beijing to have these conversations and agreements being signed, MOUs at this point of time being, and then there is persuasion, of course. When the US State Department press release is brought out in the public sphere, talk about how persuasion as being used as a tool for Beijing to adhere to the norms that have been put out by US. There have been British prime ministers and British foreign ministers who have also done the same thing. So again, I'm going to emphasize, diplomacy is the crux of building a strong working mechanism between both the countries to then find a middle ground on what India desires out of China and vice versa.
Yeah, that's true, Megha. First of all, thank you. I would, look at it in a couple of different ways. The disengagement at the two friction points was important because, you can't have a tense border when you get into talks. This is just the start. These are talks are, being held after a span of 5 years, the special SR talks. So on that front, it's a positive. And also there is one more thing. If you look at the complete chaos that is happening across the world, there is some semblance in this part. And I think both the leaders did realize that, with geopolitics changing, change of guard in the US, and there's so much of, the wars and, conflicts happening everywhere. It is very important to, keep our borders, tension free, and then, share, I wouldn't say great ties, but, at least share normal ties. Because now, although there was, there were no talks, we did engage in trade, they did too. So these talks, will be the, a stepping stone for the summit level talks. And I think it's not a process that will, get overnight or, say in a month or something. There's a lot of time lost, and each one is going to have his own different challenges with the change of leadership in the US. So at that time, I think, these things will gradually move on. I would see them, going on for some time before we have a complete solution to the problem, Megha.
Okay. Coming back to you, Major General Sudhakar ji, moving forward, talking about all that is happening in the global sphere, talking about how in the Middle East we see that Russia and Iran have retreated, and there has of course been a constant effort by China to replace United States of America in bringing about some sort of a negotiation, ceasefire, peace deal within the Arab nations. You take a look at the Ukraine-Russia war, where there at this point of time have been instances where the North Korean troops have been taken forward in Russia. There have been allegations that there have been military equipment, arms and ammunitions that have been sent from China into Russian territory to fight Ukraine. And there you have, if United States of America is wanting to, persuade India to fall in its allies' kitty and talk about its decision to push India away from Russia. And do you think this is also sort of a neutralizing factor that China is looking at when it comes to this deal that has happened over the demilitarization and the de-escalation and disengagement?
Megha, if I have understood your question well, the current shift in the stance between India and China and vice versa, is it in any way related to draw India away from the perceived American camp? If my understanding is correct, then let me comment. There is always a fear, speculation in the international environment, to my limited understanding as a student of geopolitics, is that although India is in nobody's camp, India is only in the camp of its national interest, but there is a feeling in the environment that because of the Quad, because India has become a member of I2U2, because there are strategic partnership agreements which have been signed, number of them, there is a shift in the relationship between India and America post-2000. I would say prior to 2000, it was a kind of a regressive relationship between India and USA. The period of estrangement, they call it. And post-2000, I personally feel it is a period of progressive and beneficial kind of a relationship between India and USA. That doesn't mean that India is in anybody's camp. It is just that we are trying to meet our national interest. But that is going to be a kind of a game changer as far as China is concerned. Whether you talk about Russia or China or India, India doesn't want Russia to go in for a deep embrace, nor does USA want Russia to go into a deep embrace with China. The entire balance of power will go for a toss. So if that is what is my understanding, then what is it that we would do? We would do what we have been doing right since 1971. Our relationship with Russia is an evergreen. It is higher than, like Rajnath Singh, the Honorable Defense Minister, he made a very good quotation. It is higher than the highest mountain in the world. It is deeper than the deepest ocean in the world. So that is how our relationship will continue with Russia, because people may not understand. It's very easy to talk, to diversify your dependence on the military hardware without realizing that whatever diversification has taken place in past 4 to 5 years is purely because of emergent demand, because of ad hoc requirement to meet the extended standoff. And this, in any case, is not going to be sustainable, given the fact that there is almost about good 80% Air Force, 60 to 70% of Navy, almost close to 67% of dependency on the military hardware and the inventory that we have today on Russia. Okay. So that be the fact. The last point I wish to make in reference to the comment you have made is that, in my opinion, we need to identify a spectrum, a timeline spectrum of short-term, medium-term, long-term. And in the short, medium, long-term, our economic interest should remain the primary factor. And in order to achieve that 30 trillion, which I have alluded to in the past during your session, we must identify a selective collaboration phase, selective cooperation with China, settle the border as early as possible, and be mindful of the fact you have raised the topic, but you are not discussing what is going on in Bhutan is a very dangerous thing. And today we have a distinguished and esteemed panelist with the former ambassador Stobden. There is nobody better than him to comment on the issue.
All right, fair enough. So you made your point. I'm going to bring in Ambassador Stobdan on this, and as was raised by Major General Sudhakarji, there are satellite images that have been retrieved. They found that new settlements have come up in Doklam, and taking a look at the 2017 Doklam war that had taken place, India needs to be cautious, no doubt. And the precedent that has been set in terms of the war, the Galwan war, which took us 4 years to have some sort of a constructive action being taken by China. Do you think, again, this step that has been taken, and it is in the right direction, but are we then going to take a period of 4 years for the next de-escalation or disengagement to happen from China's side? How can we escalate it?
I don't think the escalation is on the card for the time being, but reconciliation is going to be temporary one. It's a tentative, it's a tactical withdrawal from both sides. I think the Chinese are also tactical, to be very clear. Eventually, you need a bigger wisdom, something like what Russia and China has done, top bottom, a real breakthrough, a grand bargaining or grand strategy, which Prime Minister Modi is capable of doing with Xi Jinping. But that opportunity, I don't know. Both of them will get a Nobel Peace Prize if they do it to settle Aksai Chin. But that is not available now. I don't see, the current scenario does not allow. Or you need some bigger thing, something like Buddhism to come into a picture. I don't see even that is happening for now. We will continue this, but I think it's a trade for peace. You wanted trade, no, Chinese want trade, and we need peace. So it's an exchange of peace for trade, and the Chinese understand that. It's a smart move. We should take it just like that.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for joining me on the telecast. I'm out of time, and we're getting to know that the Congress party has hit out at Amit Shah over his remarks on Baba